On this Tuesday night, a possible new timeline for the spread of the coronavirus. The French hospital that retested an old sample and found a positive case back in December. What other countries are now being asked to do. The Canadian province flattening the curve.
You have to have the people, you have to have the knowledge.
New Brunswick's winning formula. What lessons can other provinces learn? The costly consequences of COVID-19 on food prices.
There's potential that you could be looking at $8 to $10 heads of lettuce or $12 cucumbers.
Why your grocery bill could balloon. And 75 years after a defining moment in history, quiet gratitude for Canada's role in liberating the Netherlands.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with fresh mystery over how long COVID-19 may have been circulating before it was first identified. Evidence has emerged in France of a positive case in late December, 4 days before China reported a cluster of cases of pneumonia of unknown cause in Wuhan. The case in France came to light after a hospital there retested frozen blood samples from patients who had pneumonia-like symptoms, and one of those tests came back positive for COVID-19. The World Health Organization is now urging other countries to retest old blood samples, too, from suspicious cases. Redmond Shannon has our top story tonight.
Amarouche Hamar looks back at a video of his time in intensive care in late December. I thought it was the flu, he told French news channel BFM TV. He had a cough, a headache and fever, but recovered and was discharged on December 29th. 2 days later, China first reported cases of pneumonia of an unknown cause. On January 23rd, the epicenter city of Wuhan was locked down. And a day after that, the first case was confirmed in Europe, a French citizen who had been to China. The virus has since killed tens of thousands in Europe. In April, a French hospital decided to retest samples taken from 14 patients who were tested for pneumonia in December and January.
Nous avons eu un qui était positif au COVID-19 le 27 décembre.
Hamar's sample was the only one that tested positive. A backup test confirmed the finding. It potentially changes the entire modelling for how COVID-19 spread, particularly because the 42-year-old hadn't even been to China.
It's not surprising. That's important because given the earliest cases of COVID-19 had symptoms onset already in early December. So it's possible that some of the infected people traveled from Wuhan to other countries at that time.
The World Health Organization now wants other countries to go back and test too.
There's always an opportunity, I think, to sort of go back further if needed to test samples. We haven't actually, as I know it, discussed that as yet, but that is potentially of interest. So we can definitely take a look at that.
Professor Luke O'Neill is working on a treatment for COVID-19. He's reserving judgment until other tests show the virus was outside of China in December.
In science, if you get a really, what you might call a wacky result, you got to wonder what's going on there. Now, one suspicion is the sample was contaminated somehow with a positive sample from January, say.
The results will also be key to the question of the virus's origin, something that has recently become a political football between Beijing and Washington. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
There is evidence tonight, too, that the original strain of COVID-19 has mutated into a new, more contagious strain. The study was done by researchers at the Los Alamos National Lab in New Mexico. It has not been peer-reviewed, but is being shared now to help those working on vaccines. It analyzed thousands of coronavirus sequences and found a new strain appeared in February in Europe, then migrated quickly to the east coast of the United States and has been the dominant strain across the world since mid-March. Wherever the new strain appeared, it quickly infected far more people than the earlier strains that came out of Wuhan, China. Here in Canada, Quebec has the most cases and the most deaths, and Quebec's public health officer said today they will now go back and investigate suspicious cases in December and January. Quebec has over 33,000 confirmed cases and nearly 2,400 people are known to have died from COVID-19. That accounts for more than half of Canada's 62,000 cases. More than 4,000 people in Canada are known to have died. There are places, though, where the curve is flattening. BC reported just 8 new cases today, the first single-digit increase in months. And New Brunswick, after going 16 days without a new case, recorded 1 new one today, but it's had no deaths and only 119 cases. Tonight, Ross Lord looks at what lessons others can learn from New Brunswick.
As the pandemic was growing in other parts of Canada, New Brunswick went more than 2 weeks without recording a single new case of COVID-19. It's a streak no one saw coming and no one can fully explain.
You have to have the people, you have to have the knowledge.
It's especially impressive when you compare New Brunswick to its neighbours. On April 19th, Quebec had just topped 18,000 cases and has since almost doubled. Nova Scotia, with a population similar to New Brunswick's, had about 700 cases and has since increased by more than 300. On that same date, April 19th, New Brunswick had just 118 cases. And by the end of Monday, that number had not budged, marking 16 consecutive days without a positive test. Even New Brunswick's relatively low rate of testing doesn't account for those differences. Of course, streaks don't last forever.
So today we have a new confirmed case of COVID-19, our first case since April 18th.
But all of those 118 New Brunswickers who tested positive have recovered. No one has died. Health researchers credit several decisions: an early ban on students returning to class if they've been on March break outside of Canada, early rules on self-isolation, and closing the province's border. And 2 things New Brunswick doesn't have: a large urban centre and a major international airport.
Areas where you have international airports, of course, there's much more opportunity for that spread to get there in the beginning and then continue with the community-based spread.
The province was first to ease social isolation rules and allow 2 households to share the same space. But it won't relax border restrictions. It's banning temporary foreign workers, even for farming and fishing industries.
We need to protect our borders. And I mean, that's been the whole discussion around the temporary foreign workers. It's not about it's going to be inconvenient. It's about how do we minimize our risk. Health authorities insist there could be successive waves of the virus. But at least New Brunswick is looking forward from a position of strength. Ross Lord, Global News.
Quebec is promising new premiums and a bonus plan for full-time healthcare workers in hopes of recruiting more staff. Premier François Legault announced the plan during his daily briefing, but offered no specifics or timeline. He says the province is down at least 11,200 healthcare workers, either because they've tested positive for COVID-19 or they fear getting it. Montreal is transforming some of its transit buses into mobile testing clinics. Each one will be used to test about 100 people per day for COVID-19 and will be disinfected regularly. The buses are part of a citywide effort to boost testing. There have been over 16,000 confirmed COVID-19 cases in Montreal. That's about half of Quebec's overall infections. The federal government is trying to ease the pressure on Canada's farmers and food producers. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced a $252 million aid package today to help farmers and food processors hit hard by the pandemic. As Abigail Bimman reports, it falls far short of what the industry says it needs.
Out making meat deliveries, Michael Tremblay is glad to hear there's some federal help for food processors like him. $77 million for things like personal protective equipment.
If there's anything out there, we would try to take advantage of.
But the day after the agriculture industry told MPs they need this,
$2.6 billion immediate support.
The Prime Minister promised just a fraction, $252 million in total. Half is for producers facing extra costs, backlogs of livestock because of meat processing plant slowdowns, 100,000 extra cattle as one example.
We have the food and there's the consumers that want the food. We just need a little help getting the food to the consumers. And this is not going to get it done.
It's quite upsetting to a number of farmers who are calling me now. My phone is blowing up because they're mad that the support's not there that we needed.
Some in the pork and poultry industry are considering euthanasia for animals that cannot be processed. Keith Curry says there will always be food on the shelves, but selection and price will be affected.
Be looking at $8 to $10 heads of lettuce or $12 cucumbers. Who knows where the price is going to settle at in the fall if we don't see some relief immediately.
This is an investment, and if we need to add more, we will.
Ottawa is also launching a $50 million food surplus program to buy extra food and get it to Canadians in need through food banks.
We will be working with the sectors that are most impacted by, have the biggest surplus, like, for example, poultry, mushrooms, potatoes.
The Agriculture Minister is encouraging farmers to take advantage of the risk management programs already in place. But those farmers are saying they've told the government for years those programs aren't working in normal circumstances, let alone a pandemic. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.
Pharmaceutical giant Pfizer has begun human clinical trials of a potential vaccine for COVID-19. It was developed in collaboration with a partner company in Germany, where trials began last month. The first phase involves 300 healthy volunteers, and that could expand to 8,000 people in the second phase. If these trials are successful, Pfizer hopes to have a vaccine ready for emergency use as early as September and possibly wider distribution by the end of the year. There is no guarantee, though. Most human clinical trials fail. Health experts say a reasonable expectation for new vaccines to be developed, tested, and manufactured is about 4 years. Russia is rapidly becoming a COVID-19 hotspot, and there are mysterious cases now of doctors falling from hospital windows. 2 of them were reportedly critical of how underprepared Russia is for COVID-19 and complained about a lack of personal protective equipment. A third doctor who's in serious condition claimed he was forced to work despite testing positive. Moscow has reported more than 10,000 new cases for 3 days in a row. The flight data and voice recorders from the Canadian Forces helicopter that crashed off the coast of Greece are being analyzed in Ottawa. The Cyclone helicopter went down April 29th while returning to HMCS Fredericton from a NATO training exercise. The military says it was within sight of the ship when it went down in the water, and there are eyewitnesses who will be interviewed. All 6 people on board were killed, 4 aircrew and 2 sailors, including Sub-Lieutenant Matthew Pike from Nova Scotia. In a statement, his family says he will be remembered as a patriotic Canadian and a true maritimer who wore his heart on his sleeve. He had a laugh which could light up any room and could make the best of any situation. A ramp ceremony will be held tomorrow at Canadian Forces Base Trenton in Ontario to honor him and the others who died. Canada's forest fire forecast coming up, why this year's season is expected to be intense. This 48-story skyscraper in the United Arab Emirates was entirely engulfed in flames and sent flaming debris to the ground below. At least a dozen fire trucks responded and used drones to fight the fire. 7 people are said to have minor injuries. In Canada, about 6,000 wildfires burn every year, and this year, Natural Resources Canada predicts the season could be worse than usual in some places. Robin Gill looks at what to expect from west to east.
There is still a dark line that shows how close a fire came to destroying this property.
The fire was basically right here.
Maria Jopa moved from Vancouver a year ago to start a hobby farm in Squamish. This was her first fire ever. Her property was spared, but she's in awe over how the flames encircled the farm with little damage.
At the time that we drove up, it looked like a relatively small fire. We could just see smoke from one of the properties. And by the time that we came back here, within 30 minutes, the fire was in our backyard.
It was mid-April when the flames exploded in this part of BC's Squamish Valley. No one expected it. It's too soon for fire season.
It's worrying. I've heard people say, well, it's raining now, it's wet, we're okay now. That's a false sense of security.
Climate and forest experts are looking at the models. For eastern Canada, the summer weather is normal. But take a look at the red on the map. You can see that fire season is expected to explode to well above average in June.
Summer will be fairly hot and dry in some places, so what our depictions are is for a greater than average potential for fires in most of Western Canada.
And the big fires often smolder right into winter.
There's less precipitation there, and so the ground is going to dry out faster, leading to drier fuels faster. And then as well, just with predicted temperature, so that obviously plays a big impact into how active a wildfire season is.
That has Jopa on guard. It was nerve-wracking enough when she heard that first crackling of flames.
We're hoping that some of the fuel was cleared by this fire and that will protect us over the summer.
These fires become part of Canada's landscape when summer arrives, and yet most are caused by people. Those in natural resources and those who fight these fires don't think that COVID-19 is going to deter people from venturing out and risking their lives on two fronts, the virus and these fires. Donna?
Robin Gill in Squamish, BC, thanks. Ahead, is any hand soap enough? More of your questions about COVID-19 answered. We're all cleaning more to protect ourselves from COVID-19, and more Canadians are accidentally poisoning themselves as a result. Health Canada says between February and March, there was a 58% increase in accidental poisonings compared to the same period last year. Incidents involving bleach made up 38% of all calls to poison control centres in March. This happens to be World Hand Hygiene Day. Washing your hands is still the easiest, most effective and affordable way to prevent the spread of disease. And this year, it's sparking plenty of discussion and questions. Our Jeff Semple went to the experts to get some answers.
My question is, are all hand soaps as effective as they need to be?
Any hand soap should work. That is, assuming you use it correctly. Studies suggest only around 5% of us wash our hands the right way.
So we've got germ powder, which is used in some environmental contamination studies to show how germs can spread. Now, I've already rubbed some of this powder on my hands, assuming I touched a contaminated surface, but you can only really see it in black light. So I'm washing my hands like I normally would, with soap and water, front and back, not really thinking about it too much. There we go. And lights out. And you can see, yeah, I missed a few spots.
We may not really rub our thumbs or our fingertips, which is how we touch a lot of our surfaces.
This doctor wrote a song to teach her own kids the proper technique.
Between the fingers, wash the back.
That song inspired this video. And to mark Hand Hygiene Day, it's now been translated into 27 languages. Another viewer asked, when I go back to work, should I be worried about using a shared washroom? Our germ powder shows the potential for contamination.
Keeping the social distancing while in the washroom is important. If there's a paper towel, you can use a paper towel to press the button that releases the soap into your hand. And you can wash your hands and rinse them and everything without touching anything at all.
And what about wearing gloves?
The gloves can actually be more trouble than it's worth.
And it can be a challenge to remove your gloves without contaminating your hand.
This Ottawa police officer even tweeted this instructional video.
Pinch the top.
Bottom line, if you want to protect yourself, the best way remains the old-fashioned way. Wash your hands, and if it helps, sing a song. Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
Next, in the Netherlands, they never forget this day and the connection to Canada.
I was 15 when the Nazis invaded the Netherlands. More than 100,000 Dutch Jews never came home. Our men were put into forced labor. By 1945, we were starving. The food drops gave us hope. And then the Canadians came.
And then the Canadians came. They helped liberate the Netherlands from the Nazis. That Heritage Minute commemorates a deep and abiding link between Holland and Canada, forged during the Second World War. On this 75th anniversary, the gratitude is felt as deeply as ever, even, as Mike Armstrong explains, if it can't be expressed as openly.
There are no big ceremonies at this, the largest Canadian war cemetery in the Netherlands. Hundreds of Canadians were supposed to have made the trip over. Even Prime Minister Trudeau planned to be on hand. None of that is happening.
en dat we hier samen staan.
Well, one tradition still being kept was on the eve of the anniversary, a speech by the Dutch king. This town square would usually have been packed as the country remembered the 250,000 Dutch people killed during the Second World War. In the same town square 75 years ago this week, thousands celebrated the end of the war as it turned out too early. German soldiers in a window opened fire on the crowd and killed more than 30. Canadian troops made it into Amsterdam the day after that shooting. They had fought for months and had finally liberated the country, but it wasn't only freedom they brought. Years under the boot of Nazi Germany had meant starvation. Canadians brought food as well. Military historian David O'Keefe says other countries remember Canada's role during the two world wars, but none the way the Dutch do.
When you are bringing food, not only liberation from political domination and ideological domination, but bringing the very basis of life to them, that is something they will never forget.
A spirit of wild fiesta reigns in towns and villages freed by the Canadian Drive.
Now, there aren't many left who were there, but none of the Canadians who were ever forgot the reception. Sergeant Norm Kirby says after days of bitter battles, one day he was suddenly surrounded by children.
And I just thought, wow, this is what it's all about. This is what I'm here for, seeing these kids. And it's my favorite picture of the war.
Some of Sergeant Kirby's friends were among the more than 7,600 Canadians killed fighting in the Netherlands. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
And that is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Donna Friesen. We leave you tonight with the sound of the bells on Parliament Hill. The 53 bells of the Peace Tower Carillon played a medley of Dutch-composed music today to honor the sacrifice of Canadians who liberated the Netherlands and the lasting friendship. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.